Yeah,
Let's do it. I want to call the regular Township of Oxford Planning Commission meeting to order on this date, September 28, 2023. If we'd all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance, I'd appreciate it. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everyone, for that. Susan, if you would note the roll this evening.
Noted, Commissioner Ballard is absent.
Okay.
Otherwise, there is a quorum.
Thank you. I need approval of the agenda for this evening.
Mr. Chair, go ahead.
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda for September 28, 2023.
Second.
I have a motion by Mr. Spiz and a second by Mr. Nold. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any negatives? Seeing none, we'll move on. I don't think there's any conflicts of interest here this evening on what we have on this agenda that I would know of, and I don't believe anybody would stand up and say so either. We need a motion of the approval of the minutes from the regular Planning Commission meeting of 6/22/23.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion that we approve the Planning Commission regular meeting minutes dated 6/22/23.
I'll support.
Okay, I have a motion by Mr. Nold and supported by Mr. Spiz. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
I also need a motion for the special joint meeting that we held with the Township Board and the Zoning Board of Appeals on 8/24/23.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion that we approve the special joint meeting with the Township Board and the ZBA on 8/24/23.
I'll support.
I have a motion by Mr. Nolan, supported by Mr. Spiz. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, we have public comment is next on the agenda. Now, this would be for things that are technically not on tonight's meeting, so it would probably mean, because we don't have a public hearing for the master plan, I don't know if anybody would like to get up and comment about that at this point in time. But this would probably be the time to do that if you're here for that reason. Okay, I see nobody actively getting up to do that. So I don't believe we have any other people here for public comments. Seeing that being none, we'll go to commissioners' comments on number 8. Anyone have any comments for this evening's meeting? Sometimes, Mr. Knoll, you do. You got any?
No, I don't.
Oh, good.
Thank you.
All right. Seeing none, we'll move on to a public hearing that we have, and it's going to be presented, I believe, by Megan tonight for amendments to our original noise ordinance that we have in place.
Good evening, Megan Masson-Minnock with Carlisle Wortman Associates, the Township's planning consultant. Tonight before the Planning Commission is a recommendation on ordinance amendments to section 10.1J noise of the zoning ordinance. In the ordinance review committee, the committee had realized when they were scheduling their work plan for this year that generators, which a lot of citizens of the township have regular maintenance, or when there are power outages, they produce decibels that's greater than the allowed noise levels by this ordinance. So the recommended language is very simple, just to add another exemption, which would allow exemptions from the noise regulations for regular maintenance or testing, and there's windows of that are typical for 30 minutes of continued use for weekly maintenance, or no more than 60 minutes of continued use noise for monthly maintenance, and then for power outages. You looked at this in June in theory, and then you called a public hearing. So the next step would either be to direct us to make any further changes that you feel are necessary, or to recommend it to the Township Board.
Thank you, Megan.
You're welcome.
We need to open the public hearing for this evening. I need a motion for that.
So moved.
Do I have support? Okay, I have a motion by Mr. Spiz to open the public hearing at, I think it's about 7:05, and a support by Mr. Nold. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Is there anyone here now that wants to give public testimony in regards to the amendments that we made to this noise ordinance? Yes, Marianne. Yeah, I know.
Good evening, Mary Ann Keynes. I reside in the Waterstone community here in Oxford Township in the Stony Lake Village condos. And I quite sure what this public hearing was in regards to, but I did make some notes that I thought might be some added value. I have some personal experience with the generators. We have many folks that have the generators within the condo setting. But I wanted to see if we were going to modify the ordinance, maybe, you know me, I'm a logistician, I get more into the weeds, into the details. I'd like to see like 3 different scenarios with decibels being addressed. I look at commercial bordering commercial, residential bordering residential, and commercial bordering residential. I think those may warrant differences in what you might allow, time, decibels, in that regard. So I was looking at those 3 different scenarios and addressing those separately. I also know that when my neighbor across the street has a Generac generator, when he runs his weekly test in order to keep his warranty valid, he has to run a weekly test. It's about 10-15 minutes. And his happens to be on a Tuesday afternoon at 12. And I always know if I'm home, you can hear it, and I'm across the street. So they are rather loud. I would like to see, again, going into the details and looking at the current ordinance, I didn't see any breakout. Because it's so loud in nature, I was hoping to see, you have 7 a.m. I think that's a little early. If someone's going to be testing it, I would say anytime after 8 a.m. And then no later than maybe 8 p.m. Because sometimes, if you have young children, they're in bed already and these are rather noisy. So I saw you look at 7 a.m. and then you look 9 p.m. To me, 9 p.m. is a little late for someone to be running a test. Again, it depends on how long their test is and what their warranty restrictions are. But I would like to see a little bit change in maybe the timeline as well.
Sorry, we got a little trouble tonight with technical.
Oh, that's okay. And I think that's pretty much it. I wasn't quite sure, like, it said petitioner. I thought somebody was here petitioning to go louder and allowing, like, maybe, more decibels. And I wasn't quite sure about that because I thought it's pretty loud already. So I can understand if the ordinance doesn't match what the manufacturer's standard for noise is and we have to go increase that, I can understand that. But right now, as more and more people seem to look to generators because our power supply maybe isn't as regular and reliable as it used to be, when you get a few neighbors that have generators all together, it gets pretty noisy, especially when there's a power outage and you are looking at continual usage of that. So I think I've exceeded my time limit. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Just so everybody in the audience knows, if you can see the screens okay, what I have in front of me right now is pretty much what the ordinance is in place right now. I did note to her that it does say 7 a.m. to 9. And this was from the previous ordinance we already had in place. What we were doing in red was just trying to say exemption for the noise created by accessory generators, and mainly like a whole house generator, like what she pointed out. Mine's been running all afternoon. I've been without power. So I don't know if my neighbors like it or dislike it, but I told them they can always plug in at my house. I got plenty of juice if they want to run a cord. But I didn't think of, I thought what we were trying to do, and when we originated, Megan, you want to get up for a minute, but I can speak too, but highly, but right now this is just an amendment for whole house or any type of generator. Mine runs 8 minutes every Saturday at 1 o'clock.
Mr. Chair, we're in the middle of the public hearing,
Oh, I
and
can't
so
talk right
it would
now.
be
What am
more
I
appropriate
thinking?
for us to have
I
this discussion
apologize.
after
Thank
the
you
public
so
hearing
much.
is closed.
We gotta let the public hearing close. Good grief. I got carried away again. I'm bad. And now I got no signal again. Okay, is there anyone else from the audience that would like to get up and speak now, please? Since I've been placed on the bad list.
You're good. Just hold it like that.
Just hold it like that. I'm trying not to even touch it. Well, I'm seeing none that want to get up and speak, so I need a motion then to get my act together to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Second?
We're closing the public meeting at 7:10 this evening, and I have a motion by Mr. Spiz and seconded by Mr. Knoll. So all those in favor say aye. Aye. We have closed it. Now we have comments from the township's consultants and staff. Thank you, Megan.
So in reaction to what was shared in the public hearing, the way the noise ordinance works is that it's the zoning of the adjacent property. So the first box is measured in decibel levels 60 to 50, quieter 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. and 60 decibels 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. and 9 p.m. to 7 p.m. The way that those are stratified is that the first box is residential, the second box is office or commercial, and then the last box is the last row is industrial. It doesn't necessarily put it next to one another, and that was not something that the ORC looked at. If you would like that to happen, I would say to direct that back to the ORC, but just so you and the public know, if ever there is a violation, if someone feels that it's too noisy in a residential area and it's above that 60 decibels between 7 a.m. to 9 p.m., no matter what type of use is adjacent to them, that's the decibel level that would be a code violation. So second point from the public hearing is in terms of when that regular maintenance happens. If you feel like you should specify a window for that exemption, for that, because the way it's written now, it exempts it at any time. So somebody could, in theory, test their generator at midnight. I think that likely you would maybe not want that to happen. So you could then, if you wanted to recommend this to the township board, to say also recommend with the addition of a certain window of time when that exemption would be allowed for the testing, for the regular maintenance and the testing. So item 3A. And then I'd be happy to answer any other questions about the proposed zoning ordinance amendment.
Well, I'm having trouble with signal, but
Yeah.
thank you for that. If anybody has any questions for me, Mr. Spiz?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess one question, or actually a couple questions, and maybe one point of question. First point is, I believe per ordinance, the measurement's taken from the property line.
Yes.
So whatever the property line is of one of the adjacents, that's where a measurement is to be taken from, okay?
Yes.
So it's not right next to the unit.
No.
All right. Second, or the other question is, do we have a rough idea of what noise levels a generator makes? 'Cause I know there's different brands. You know, Generac probably makes X, Honda makes Y. Because I know, I mean, for anybody that's
There's all kinds of manufacturers.
right, but because I know if anybody here is a camper,
Yeah.
right?
We,
A lot of campgrounds have the same requirement, but they have a level on it that requires you to buy a certain generator.
correct. And so we didn't necessarily at the ORC level look at that level of decibels. We just looked at the time period and figured that that was the better use in terms of maintenance and regular. I do know that 50 decibels is the equivalent of what you hear in your kitchen when you have a refrigerator there. You know, there's a constant hum, and then as you get higher, it's the sound of adjacent traffic on a busy road. So these are pretty standard decibel levels. And this is also something that is, from a code enforcement point of view, is often difficult to enforce because the readings have to happen at a certain time, and usually it has to be proven to be consistent.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Knoll?
I have a little experience with this. A couple factors is, yes, the decibels are taken at the property line. A great many of the generators, I cannot speak for all of them, but primarily this is dealing with the whole house generator, exceed the noise decibel levels out of the box. They measure the noise decibels at 300 feet with the Generac, I know. They don't even meet the requirements out of the box when they're put in or installed. The second issue is that there's a great many homes that are, the property lines are such and the setbacks are such, when a generator is faced the opposite house, the noise will ricochet off that house and work its way down and be considerably louder than what if it would happen just to go out into a vacant field. So this is why that I'm in favor of a regulation, expanding the regulation for these generators because, for maintenance as well as for power outages. It's a good thing to happen. I think that you would be surprised the amount of generators that are existing in the township that don't meet the requirements today and didn't meet the requirements when they were pulled out of the box to be installed.
Any other comments from any of the commissioners? I think I have a couple myself, but,
a very good idea.
I think it's great that a person that has the availability to put one in for themselves. Some people, they don't have that availability. I think when we wrote this, and I was on the committee that helped write it, we tried to just exempt the actual generated power that people need in an emergency. This is not for any other reason. And when I don't have power, there's certain things I want to run and for particular reasons for myself, but we thought we did a pretty good job. I respect what Mary Ann got up and said, but we have to have something in place. And when I go back to the original measurements, these are quite quiet for a residential area when we look through this whole part from 7 a.m. to 9. I suppose 1 hour could make a difference, but a lot of people are up and about and going at 7. My maintenance time comes on at Saturday at 1 p.m. And even my neighbor knows it because he talked about it. But I think it was looked at quite well by the Ordinance Review Committee. And I think we're trying to establish something that's only for an emergency condition. This is not for everyday use, so I'm kind of okay with it myself, with what we put together, but that's because I was part of helping put it together. Does anybody else have anything in regards to it? We have Mr. Bailey?
My only concern with changing the times, I mean, I understand for residential, maybe going 8 to 8, but office buildings or even the industrial, some of these guys are running operations at 6 in the morning, 7 in the morning. So for them to not be able to do a test until business hours might be a little inconvenient if we made it 8 to 8.
You know, a lot of our times in the ordinance are particular to 7 a.m. when anything starts, like construction activities, different noises for children that have to have their school sleep and then get up. And in the evenings, the reason we chose that is so there's a quiet time for a lot of them to help themselves get in bed and get their rest. I think the times are similar to other times we have in other ordinances right now, which I think are kind of good for us to probably stay within those guidelines. I don't think an hour difference is going to do us a lot more because it's only for emergency purposes. So I'm good with the times right now.
Yeah.
Mr. Spiz.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess to talk more about times, I'm okay with the times in general, right? The way they're shown right now for general measurement. But I believe from a testing perspective, because you can set that any time, right? You can set it.
Yeah, it's programmable.
It's programmable. So, I mean, you don't want to testing like at midnight, 1 a.m., 2 a.m., because you could set it for that. So I would be in support of putting in a set time frame that for general, regular testing, you have to be from X to Y, and that's it. For this, this is to me is when there's other issues going on and you need to, your generator's running because of a power outage. Okay. I mean, you're going to measure it. But if you're also got other things going, that's what you're measuring. I mean, part of this is if you're having an event and a party, that's what it's for, right? That's what it's all there for. If you live next somewhere else, that you have an avenue to keep things at a certain level. I mean, in some cases, you can use this for dog barking too, to a degree. So that's what the general scope is.
You can make a motion to kick this back.
Do we have to kick it back, or can we make a motion to amend it and send that to the board as amended?
As long as it's dealing with what's in the red text, because that's what was, that's what was noticed.
So we could add like a 3C
Or
or a 3A1.
Yeah. So, for instance, 3A could read regular maintenance or testing of generators with no more than 30 minutes of continued noise for weekly maintenance and no more than 60 minutes of continued noise for monthly maintenance between the time period of 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. or 8 a.m. to 8 p.m.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Mr. Knoll.
I'd like to get a flavor of what time frames. Is 7 to 9 would appeal with the board?
Well, I think for testing purposes, I wouldn't be opposed to go from 8 to 6.
8 to 8.
I mean, that's enough time to test any device. I mean, mine runs for 8 minutes in a test mode. That's it. And that's once a week. So that's way less than 60 minutes in a month. And, from 8 a.m. until 6 p.m., people in their evening times can have their own peace and quiet. You don't have to test mode after 6 a.m. So why even make it 12 hours? Just do it in 10.
So
8 a.m. to 6 p.m.
Okay.
That's my recommendation if we're going to make that change.
Got a guy down the end.
Mr. Hunwick, I see you down there. You have your hand up.
Yeah, I'm here. I guess we talked about this in ORC, at least from my recollection, but what does a lawnmower make?
I don't even want to go there. Wait.
I understand that, but
Wait.
I had a standby generator in my previous home up until 3 years ago, and I relocated to my current home. My standby generator was a Generac, and it produced lower decibel levels. I can't tell you the number, but it produced lower decibel levels than any lawnmower running throughout the neighborhood cutting the grass. I had to run my generator today, which was kind of portable, and I listened to that, and I'm sitting there thinking, this is not any louder than what all of my neighbors' zero-turn lawnmowers are all running at. The testing is a different story, I guess. My Generac, we only tested 8 minutes, I think, once a week.
That's what I was.
Yeah, that's right.
Same thing. I still am. I still have the unit.
But it's no more than somebody's lawnmower. I mean, that's substantially.
We have a lawn care exemption right there in front of us.
But that's my point, is that I will use my generator if I need to, like today. I was out power today for 4 hours, so I kicked it on. But most of the people that use the generators, they're only using it for an emergency.
Correct. There might be a construction site where they're using it for.
Well, that's a different story. I mean, they're using it because they don't have power accessible to build a house or whatever they're doing. But
Well, correct.
um,
But there are other devices that run at different times and different reasons and why. But you brought up the lawnmower thing, and they were mowing 2 lawns today when my generator was going, and I couldn't tell which one was which.
If I may, point of order, we're here to talk about the generator exemption
Yeah.
specifically,
I know.
so. Just
And
don't
you-
want to
and
try to
you-
divert,
and John's
plus I'm
got-
trying to keep us on time.
Is there a
so we get out
motion
of
on
here.
the floor?
I'm ready to make a motion, Mr. Chair.
All right.
I move to recommend approval for the zoning ordinance text amendment to the Township Board to exempt power generators from certain noise regulations during either weekly/monthly routine maintenance or power outage. We recommend that a window of time for testing be between 8 a.m. and 6 p.m.
I'll second for discussion.
Okay, I have support for the motion, and it was well read by John and supported by Mr. Spiz. Is there any discussion of the planning commission members at this time? Mr. Spiz, I think you have your hand up.
Yes, I do. My only comment to the time frame, since item 2 is already set from 7 to 9, why would you make it different?
I think because it's only for testing. That's what he said.
It's true.
But now you want to change that?
Oh, I'd be open for the change. I mean, I'll support that, but I'm one for consistency. And you made a comment earlier that many places throughout our ordinance,
We
it's from
have-
7 to 9.
We-
Mr. Chair, the lawn care equipment exemption is totally separate from the generator exemption.
I know.
To keep those, to try to bundle those together, I don't see where the benefit would be. The generators are there to be tested. There are times when the generators, the electronics fail, they run at different times, but the homeowner would call and have someone come out and reprogram that generator. So I think we're being very generous between the 8 a.m. and 6 p.m.
Well, aren't those hours that the building department who would do the testing is available? In other words,
It's more appropriate.
yeah.
Yeah.
And maybe from 8 to 5 in that case, to get in the person's working days.
I don't want to sit here and belabor this too much further, but we have a motion on the floor. We have support for the motion. Now we're into discussion. I'm ready to call a question, actually, if we want
Somebody wants
to.
to make an amendment.
Unless someone else wants to make another, an alteration to the amended motion that Mr. Nold made.
Vote on what's on the floor. If it goes down, you can have a new motion. That's fine.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Let's call a question and vote. You know what, Susan, if that's the case, let's do a roll call vote.
That's gonna pass.
Hunwick,
Yes.
Spiz,
Yes.
Bailey,
Yes.
Turner,
Yes.
Nold,
Yes.
Berger.
Yes, it passed. Okay, so we're done with that. And I appreciate everybody's comments, thank you. Now, that was just the motion and discussion and vote. Okay, now we're into unfinished business. We have none. Seeing none, we're gonna go to new business. And we have discussion of the sign regulation, and I think Megan is gonna start us out with that this evening. I think I have my act together a little bit.
Yeah.
Thank you, Megan.
You're welcome. Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Ordinance Review Committee has been working diligently on amending your sign regulations. The reason that the sign regulations need to be amended is there was a Supreme Court case, Reed versus the Town of Gilbert, which rendered content-based restrictions unconstitutional. So quite simply, if you have to read a sign to know what type of sign it is, such as a political sign or a real estate sign, then your ordinance is unconstitutional because it's based on it's based on speech and it's violating freedom of speech. That Supreme Court case was amended, was re-examined in the past year, and while the content neutrality was not was still in place, what backed off were some regulations on not being able to regulate billboards. The ORC has looked at sign regulations in Independence Township, Orient Township, and Village of Oxford, all which had been brought up to date in order to comply with that Supreme Court case. And we also did a driving tour of Lapeer Road from the southern end of the township to the northern end of the township to look at all the different types of signs that were there. And the committee has come up with a general structure that I advise bringing to the Planning Commission to get your sign off on before we start to write any zoning ordinance amendments. Because in addition to looking at content neutrality, there were some major changes that they're proposing. Number one, to move your sign regulations from the zoning ordinance to a standalone ordinance. And that is what Orient Township has. And the main reasons to do that is it gives you greater flexibility to consolidate billboards, and then also to phase out non-conforming signs. When you have regulations in the zoning ordinance, you're bound by those restrictions that are upon it by state law, such as nonconformities, and also the Board of Zoning Appeals being able to grant variances. And I think representatives from the ZBA can attest that a lot of your variances that have come before you lately have dealt with signs and height, and billboards in particular. So that's a major change. I wanted to make sure that that was something that the Planning Commission was in favor of before starting to write a standalone ordinance. The ORC also felt like it would be better to regulate the signs by location and use, and specifically using the type of sign districts that Independence Township uses. So rather than doing it by general zoning districts, and again, if you're in a standalone ordinance, you are then separated, and so you could create your own sign districts. And Independence Township has done that along Sashabaw and Dixie Highway. And so what is proposed, and this is on page 2 of the memo that we sent to you, is that there would be a sign district from South Lapeer Road, so the area from the intersection of Teelan Drive to the northern boundary with the Village of Oxford. A middle Lapeer Road, which again, that's from the northern boundary of the Village of Oxford, north to the intersection of Dunlap Road. Northern Lapeer Road from Dunlap all the way to the northern boundary with Metamora Township. Then for all other signs in the township that are in an industrial area that's zoned or used for, that's zoned for industrial use, those have their own sets of regulations. And then anything that is zoned for recreation, public or quasi-public uses, those have their own sets. And then residential has their own sets of regulations. And what that can help with is along Lapeer Road in particular, if you drive it, you'll see that there's very distinct districts, and also there's very distinct use of signs. In that southern part of the township and Lapeer Road, there are lots of pole-mounted signs that are quite a bit taller than any pylon or pole-mounted signs that are north of the village. Those tend to be, if the mounting is, those tend to be on something that's mounted no more than 4 feet. But when you get down the southern part of the township, sometimes they're 6-8 feet in the air. And one of the things to look at when you're amending any ordinances is to make sure that you're not creating a lot of nonconformities or signs that no longer meet the regulations. The other thing that was a big change was to really restrict the brightness and manner and time frame for electronic copy changes. Electronic messaging signs have gotten a lot more sophisticated in the past 10 years and have the possibilities for animation and moving copy and just a lot of different things to go on. And the ORC wanted to restrict those, and particularly banning animation or moving copy. So we wanted to present that to you tonight and get general reactions, particularly from those planning commissioners who are not on the ORC, as to whether you would be in support of this framework going forward, and what concerns or affirmations you had.
I don't see any hands flying up in the air yet, but let's give them a few minutes to digest what you just said. Since I'm on the ORC and we looked at this for weeks, I mean, this did not happen in 1 month or 2 months. It was way longer than that. And most people in the audience don't know how much time we actually spent on it. So Mr. Nold is also, Mr. Hunwick is also. So if Mr. Spiz or Mr. Bailey or Bob, you had something you want to talk about, I don't know.
No.
I think what we're trying to say is, we want to move it forward. And a lot of the things that came out of Megan were also dictated somewhat by the attorney's opinion as to why we made some of these changes, because it's in compliance with the law that we were not in compliance with currently in our ordinance. So we're trying to abide by the rules of what were dictated by the state, not our rules, from some other form of government. So we're trying to put us in a perspective to where we follow that guideline too, with the rules that are promulgated through Lansing. So I think we did a pretty good job on it myself. I'd like to see it move forward if we could. I mean, it's a lot of information. When you look at the whole draft ordinance, it's several pages long, and most people don't know. I brought my copy because I read it at home a few different times, and there's a lot to think about in it. And there's a lot of red in here that's wasn't in here before, so it's several pages, and when you have to look at 20 pages of something, after a while you get confused. So I don't know if anybody had time to look at John.
I think the other thing that the ORC worked on was simplicity. We're trying to make this ordinance simple, that different
Follow.
people to follow
Yeah.
and to understand. And that's why we came up with the six different districts. We spent 3 or 4 hours just driving up 24 one afternoon, looking at the different variations of signs, and boy, do we have them. We have about every sign that you could imagine is out there, and then some. So for us to try to corral this animal of signage and manage it properly with an ordinance that we can actually use as in some cases, a business owner or a resident or a commercial manufacturer, but that's one side. We have to be able to work with it inside our township itself. So I think we've got a good plan out there to use.
And I think some of the criteria that when we first started talking about signage, and one of my components that I had in my mindset was, I see signs in all kinds of communities and cities and whatnot. And then when I asked Megan, I said, can we dictate, like where we have a 30-mile-an-hour speed limit or 40, and then we go to 55-mile-an-hour speed limit. I mean, we need bigger signs to be able to read what we're looking at those speeds. And she said, yes. And I said, when a sign is further off the roadway, we need larger signs to then be able to see what those signs say so we know where we're going. When I went down to Royal Oak Beaumont to the hospital there and looked at what the signage was from the road, it looks huge in a sense. And I said, when we have something, if that nature came out here, we would want to have that same ability to read those signs from a distance and know what we're seeing. I think when I'm trying to find a place sometimes and I see a little teeny sign, I'm past it before I realized where the sign was to get me in there. So we looked at the whole aspect of what we tried to do to make what we thought was going to be beneficial for business people, industrial people, and even ourselves as individuals that have to go to those places. So we spent a lot of time on it. I'm ready to move it forward, but I don't know the feeling of everybody on the planning commission at this time.
If I may, Mr. Chair, I don't have any objections to what you guys are proposing. I mean, I'd like to see it in detail and read it, so it's kind of hard for me to comment without actually reading all
I
the
can
detail.
give you my copy.
But the overall description, as you just described, I don't have an issue with.
Yeah,
Okay.
same way.
There would have to be a particular motion then to move this on as far as, or not.
It's just a
Nope,
discussion.
no, this was just a
Discussion, we're only here for
just a
discussion.
discussion. What, then we will take as direction is to write that sign ordinance. We have an ORC meeting set for later in October to have a draft of that sign ordinance back to you at least a week ahead of time.
Yeah.
For you to look at it, and then hopefully that it could come to the planning commission for review, and possibly
After the
recommendation
ORC
in
then,
November.
yeah. So we're talking about sometime in November when we have a meeting date. The next available meeting date probably in November.
Yes.
We'll be deer hunting. Okay, sorry I said that. All right, thank you, Megan.
You're
I
welcome.
think we know which direction we're gonna go then from that. So next on the committee for discussion, I think, Mateo's gonna help us out with our discussion of master plan.
Yeah, so good evening, Commissioners. Mateo Paslacqua, Carlisle Wortman Associates, planning consultant for Oxford Township. I work with Megan Mason-Minnock. And so, if you recall, we did the joint meeting regarding the master plan update. And so now that we kind of have our direction moving forward with the style and the size and the breadth of that master plan update, one of the things that we wanted to look at was the 2019 plan. What about it, is still relevant? What about it maybe needs updating? What about it, what is it lacking that maybe the 24 plan should have, and or what does it have that maybe the 24 plan doesn't need? And obviously as time goes on, we'll learn more about kind of the priorities and the focus. But what we wanted to do was put some topics in front of you to kind of gauge your opinions on, are these priorities, are these items relevant, as we move forward with the plan. So, without obviously just reading this to you, some of the ones I can kind of go through them quickly. I think some of them held a little bit more weight than others, although all of them are important. Some of the information that will need updating is things like housing. We think you're probably going to want to take a look at your attached style and apartment style residential from the perspective that it relates to an aging population and the type of housing that they're looking for. Population we want to look at, that's kind of a given. What age ranges are you projected to grow in? What do you have now? Taxes from the perspective of tax base. Right now you make all your money off residential, and I don't see that changing over the next 10 years, but I think it's worth looking at. Is there a way to diversify it on some level? What would that diversification look like? My apologies, I sound awful, I feel fine, but just give me a little bit of breath there on my raspiness. Employment, I think, is an important one from the perspective of you have a lot of commuters. Where are they working? If they're working here, what sectors is that in? Are those sectors going to grow? Could they grow? Should they? So on and so forth. Transportation almost kind of feeds into commuting a little bit, but more from the perspective of, again, if you're going to grow, your transportation routes are going to experience that higher demand. Is the capacity there? Where does it need to improve? Facilities, This one was kind of, some of this was informed by actually the Parks and Rec survey, where there seemed to be a very strong sentiment for a community center or a senior center. But I think it also relates to what kind of public services are going to be required over the next 10 years and what kind of facilities are those services going to require. Utilities has been part of the conversation with water and sewer. Another part of this is renewable energy as it relates to utilities. Currently your zoning ordinance doesn't speak to those uses, although you definitely have land that would cater to it. And it might be worth doing some homework on what role renewable energy could play in the community as a land use going forward. Developable land, this is worth updating again because the last time we looked at it was 5-6 years ago, and things have changed since then, and things will change in 5 to 6 years with those large tracts of land and how they could be developed, where they could be developed. Open space preservation, we thought this was important from the perspective of very two common themes that keep coming up are development pressure and preservation of open space and natural features. Those two typically find themselves in conflict. So from the perspective of what can we do around open space preservation, development rights, things of that nature where we can try to find the maximum utilization of land possible. Think about it from the perspective of if there's demand for 400 units, but per open space requirements and things of that nature, a developer can only do 250 units, they're going to find the 150 units somewhere else in the community. I'm not saying it's good, I'm not saying it's bad. I'm just saying from the perspective of trying to cater to the demand that's coming, but also retaining a lot of your open space, this is something worth looking at. Funding is important. You have a growing population with growing needs, growing demands. All of that's going to cost money. What funding mechanisms do you have? But also, in surveying the community, what types of funding are they open to? And, from that perspective, does the cost meet the benefit? Information to be added or expanded upon. Your urban service boundary is one that needs to be expanded upon. I mean, your USB as it is today is somewhat irrelevant if you want to continue with development and meeting those demands as they come forward. So really you start to think about where's the next ring of that urban service boundary expansion, or is it expanded? I mean, again, I think the conversation is that it will be likely, but how, where? We do have some planning areas in the scope. I believe there's 2 called for. This is another tool where you can kind of specifically call out certain geographies within the community, and you can really kind of dive a little bit deeper into what you would like to see or what the community would like to see done in those areas or maybe not done in those areas. I think it's worth noting that the village should be expanded upon in the conversation of the township's master plan. I don't think you have the village without the township. I don't think you have the township without the village. And I think there's a lot of your residents who enjoy certain amenities the village offers. I think there's also ways in which the township can develop around the village that's complementary without trying to replicate. I think both serve 2 very different but necessary purposes. Safety paths is another one that I think should be expanded upon. I believe in the current 19 plan, it is a strategy, and I think it's worth moving up to a goal. In every development meeting, pre-app, conversation at the desk I've had regarding development, safety paths come up. I know they're important to the community, so I think from that perspective, they're worth putting in bold 18 font as opposed to regular 11-point font, just so that it's very clear that they're there, that they're important, that they need to be anticipated for, in the future development years of the township. Capital improvement program, that's worth expanding upon just because that's another resource in which, again, what are the costs associated with the infrastructure that we're going to need? How do we find funding for that? Where's that money best spent based on the feedback that you're getting from the master plan? Almost anything and everything that gets discussed is going to cost money. You all know that from your daily lives. And information to be removed or reduced. You currently have 21 designations in your future land use map. I wouldn't say that there's necessarily an equation for what's too many and what's not enough. But I will say that based on kind of what your goals are for the future land use map, and the future land use designations, it might be worth reducing that number only from the perspective that too many at some point could cause confusion or even conflict as far as what there's designated for, designations are very similar, so on and so forth. And I'm happy to answer any questions you have regarding the memo. I know that we have some very specific questions that we want to get guidance on tonight. I can kind of pause there and see if there's any questions up to this point, and we can move on to the questions, the specific ones after that.
I think when we had the plan meeting, it was a really good meeting with the groups that were all there. And we had some pretty good members already from the audience and whatnot that were there also. And when we presented all these ideas as to what each one was supposed to want to see, maybe take a change in the township, we wrote these all on a sticky note, and the sticky notes all went up in certain places as to under what category they fell under. And I think when I looked at the residential numbers too of people here, I think they're wrong. I think what we actually got from SimCog, because we're at about, it says we're about almost 1,900 here and projected to only go to 21. We have enough in the community right now looking at us with development that we're going to exceed that 21,000 number of residents in Oxford way before the year that they have it notable for in growth. Right through 2050, absolutely not going to be that. So that's.
I'm sorry, Tom.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, so you're leading yourself into answering the very first question, which is what demographics or land use data do you feel is needed for the master plan update?
Well, that's when you go back to where the people were trying to make those decisions. I mean, there's so much data right now under this plan to plan. It's hard for me to put it all in the right shape to find it when what the people were looking for. But each group that we put them in, when we implemented the recreation, and we tried to then look at the infrastructure of roads and necessary what it's going to take to get us around in the community as these numbers grow. I think roads were also a good comment. I mean, I think we have a pretty good network of pathways right now for walking and whatnot with a safety pass. Obviously, as we develop more land, we'll want more of those. I think the new one that just went all the way down Ray Road and then headed towards the south on Oxford Road around the high school was a well-deserved path because I know people are going to use it. And I see people in Boulder Point all the time on the pathways. I think it's incredible. And so those were very important to me also. I think there's certain quadrants in the community that we talked about that we don't want to see a lot of change happen. Myself personally, if I was north of Ray Road and heading out towards the northeast quadrant in Oxford, let's just keep it the same. I mean, it's a nice equestrian area. I think it's a beautiful part of Oxford. We don't need a lot of change there. I think when you go down to certain southern portions of Oxford, you get down towards Drainer Road, where we already have a lot of R1 use, and we're looking at the new subdivision on the old Camp Oakland property that has been picked up and designed and developed. It's going to be developed right now currently, and some of the other new areas that we have. We're going to see those numbers expand. So I don't know everybody's personal opinion, but I think the more input when we do this steering committee group, because I think that's going to be important to get as much input from the public. Anybody that wants to come and put input, please come and find out what we want to know from you, what you want to see. I think that's going to be the most important part is the steering committee to get out there to get the people from the public to come in and say, this is what we really think we need in Oxford.
No, 100%.
If we can do all that, I was surprised already when she told me that we have a pretty good number already selected on the steering committee group.
And she's got a conversation all teed up for that.
Okay, I'm going to leave that alone.
After I get you guys to answer these questions.
Okay, well, then get these guys going.
No, I mean, so again, from that perspective, I mean, are there any other demographic or major items that the board thinks is, that are important to review? Again, it's all important, but where are the priorities?
I think M24 corridor, when you head north of Ray Road, those are opportunities for more industrial and commercial activities that we can utilize in the township. That to me is going to happen. Nobody can predict when gravel mining operations will cease on properties because it becomes a profit thing. If you can dig down 100 feet to get soil and still bring it up and make a profit off and go that deep, fine. But right now with levee, that's about the depth of where they can go to bring up sand and gravel and still make it profitable for them to then mine that deep. They have soil down to 200 feet. They have all kinds of good soil. It's not profitable to go that deep with a barge. But that's a prediction that we can't produce mentally because we won't know when those numbers are going to be non-profitable. I guess that's the way I want it. And that's when gravel mining land will probably be reclaimed. So
I think it's safe to assume that if you're looking to get 5 to 10 years out of this next update, that you'd want to comfortably assume for, I guess, majority is vague, but the majority of them becoming potentially residentially active.
well, when I look at the corridor of M24, it is what it is. I mean, we get a lot of people that run through here every day. They don't stop in Oxford. So I think our commercial activity is going to have to be increased on that corridor to help build what the people in the community want to see themselves. They don't want to drive to Timbuktu for everything. They want to shop closer to home. I think that whole corridor, when you go south in the direction, there should be some more commercial activity. And when we go north, there should be industrial and commercial activity. On 24, the corridor is what it is. 66,000 vehicles daily going up and down that thing. Gravel trains about 1 every 3 to 4 minutes on the roads in Oxford. Good grief. I just had to replace my windshield the other day. So, I mean, there's a lot of areas that I like the way they are now, but we got to look at how areas are going to be expanded from all the reclaimed property that's going to come at us. There's thousands of acres.
Sure.
So that's where I think we need to, and if we have the roads to get around in, I think roads are very important in our community right now. So that's just me talking, with my own opinions.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Mr. Hunwick.
That's okay. One of the, questions I have is, what is the status of the local control being taken away for gravel mining? That will have an effect on how we go forward with some of this, will it not?
So from sources that I know who are very involved in that in Lansing, because another community that I represent has had a gravel pit application before it, is those bills were stuck in the Senate committee and likely not to get out during this session. However, what those bills were dealing with was the expansion or new gravel mines, not necessarily what happens when those gravel mines come offline. And as the chair said, it's no longer profitable. I think the planning challenge to look at in the master plan is to say, after the extraction is done, those areas, what should they be redeveloped as, and have a plan in place, or at least some guidelines or standards to look at for that time period.
Yeah, but what if somebody wants to come in and start a new mine where we've got plans for a particular?
That's not going to happen probably right now, based on what.
Well, that's what I'm asking. The question is,
Again, I don't think you're going to lose your local control based on what's going on in Lansing at this point in time. But with every new session, you have another thing coming. So you already have in terms of dealing with new pits, you have an extraction area that's been set in your master plan for a very long time. So actually minimizing that would probably be, I think might make your township attorney uncomfortable. But you have a very set area at this point, and I think my recommendation would be, or our recommendation would be, to keep that the same. Our take on it is that the real planning challenge is to look at lands where extraction is going on right now. When that extraction use ceases, what happens there?
right.
I mean, to me personally, the properties that they're developing through the mining operations, by developing, I mean digging lakes. We have pristine lake waterfront properties that will probably come to us in the near future. And I feel like as you feather away from M24, as you feel a little further away, there's going to be some nice developmental residential properties that will come from these gravel mining operations when they cease. I just don't know the timetables, because we've been mining for 100 years in Oxford. over 100 years. And they claim there's gravel still down on the ground for possibly who knows how many years thereafter. So I don't know, but I mean, there's a way we can do it master planning wise.
I guess from my perspective, if we're just talking minds right now,
Well,
I think it's kind of narrow to the overall scope. But I mean, to me, in the next 10 years, that's not going to change much from what it is today. There's, like you said, a lot of gravel down there. Depends on what permits they get from the state to dig. Because they'll dig until they don't make money on it, right? And then they'll reclaim it. To me, that's going to be longer than 5. You might start seeing a transition to at 10, you might. But to me, I would do everything around that for sure and almost just say what if in that area. Even if it doesn't get developed, this is what if.
And what I mean by, the idea of where it should feather itself out, I think those areas are gonna be more residentially inclined to be developed in that manner. And the properties we have right now, though, that we're looking for the next 5 years, when we expand north of Ray Road, and we have the water and sewer capacity kind of expanding in that direction now, we're gonna open up to more industrial and commercial activity,
Yeah.
which is what I want a master plan for.
This is a lovely conversation, but we also asked some questions that are a little bigger picture in terms of what items should be discussed with the public.
Right.
And that would be lovely to hear from all of you. And then also, neither Mateo or I, our firm was involved with, I think, your past 2 master plan updates. But neither of us have been here during that. And there's always lessons to be learned from previous experiences, and wanted to hopefully have you share your wisdom in the room of what lessons learned are from those past master plan updates that you've been involved in.
And plus new people moving into the community, we wanna hear their comments too.
Yeah.
They came from various places, and we wanna know what they wanna do. You have questions?
I guess from a public perspective, why would we want to limit the discussion topics? To me, it's an open forum. Even if we have more than one meeting, let's start off blank piece of paper. What do you guys want to see? What is your vision? Or what don't you want to see? I'm sure we'll get a lot of different stuff, but that might help us whittle down some of the things that we may be thinking, or find some things we're not thinking, right, that are out there. I mean, I know what I've been here 20-something years. Some of you guys have been here a lot longer than that. But, I have some things that I would like to see not change. Horse country for sure. But that's me, right? And I would also wouldn't like to see, any residential developments, nothing smaller than 1 acre per lot. That's me. I don't want to see all these small lots. I don't, anywhere in the community. Then that we don't already have it. So any new development to me should be 1 acre or bigger. That's me. But I want to see what the public wants.
I don't know who to ask first, but
Mr. Turner.
I've got a question.
let me go down to Mr. Turner, because he hasn't really made much comment yet. Go ahead, Mr. Turner.
To me, one of the most important things that we can do is provide adequate medical service. And by that, I mean 24-hour hospitalization ability. And the question, I guess, that really comes up is that's been tried. The state, at this point, has been the cog that has stopped it. So if we put that in our master plan and want to try to get it, can the state, or will they still shut that down?
The state still has the power to issue the hospital certificates. However, if you would like to see that in the future, it's better for you to have it in the plan and recognizing the power of the state to issue those certificates. If you don't have it in the plan, then when they're looking at their certificates, they're looking for that sort of community commitment through the master plan or to be articulated elsewhere, then you've lost an opportunity.
Okay.
Did I answer your question, Mr. Turner?
Yeah, pretty much. We need to have it in the plan. We need to have it in our population studies by ages so that you can see where the needs are for a hospital. If you got a lot of people that are in their 80s, you probably have more of a need there, and if you got a lot of people in their teen years.
Yeah.
So That's my feeling and one of the top priorities.
So then, a priority in terms of demographics would seeing populations by age and also how that'll change in the near future. And then as well, planning for certain land uses, having medical and hospital be something that's explored as a priority.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with what McLaren's doing, but we do need a 24-hour patient hospital.
Okay, thank you.
We had a breakdown of something I was trying to find, and I apologize. I'm just trying to work the screen a little bit.
Yeah, there was a,
There's so much in here, it's difficult. Now, this is a little bit what we're talking about right now, where we know we can have some expansion on the north portion of Oxford here because of anticipated water and sewer and whatnot. But everybody has a difference of opinion, even including the PC members.
Absolutely.
And then when we hear more from the public, once we get more comments, I think we'll have a better understanding what the top elements are gonna be and the direction where we're gonna go. And he made good points about medical, because we all wanna see medical nearby if we can. We all wanna see that, I'm sure of it. To make and then this is what we have. I thought this was all pretty good when we did all this stuff.
You have more
Chair,
specific
I think I
questions?
see other hands.
I do. Mr. Knoll, I apologize.
if you go the other way, there is a listing of the categories that Mateo had up that came out of our meeting on the 24th. Keep going. And I think medical was number 2 on that list.
Oh, on that's the list I was looking for.
Yeah, keep going.
So it's above me right now?
It's above you.
Page 19.
Is it?
Yeah.
Keep going.
You're at 26.
Keep going.
I'm trying. My finger's working this little cursor here. It's just me,
Oh, right there.
right here.
Yeah, see,
Now, do I need to bring it a little bigger? Bigger than
Hit
that?
the plus sign.
Well, where am I at?
Just hit the
Where's,
plus
I see it now. I'm getting there. Oh, that's too big now. I gotta move the page over. This is what we were talking about, community engagement.
right,
Yeah, medical was way up on top,
right.
right. I'm surprised that industrial's so low. I really am, because helps the benefit of taking some of the burden off the residents when it comes to tax purposes and such. And also helps schools, with the tax base.
Most people don't. No.
So, I think we've covered all of the questions except for lessons learned from previous master plan processes.
Do we have other comments from this end? I'm sorry, Mr. Knoll, what do you got?
The last master plan was very useful in the work that I've done in the township over the years. It's held itself to be true, and we've
Oh.
gone back and used it for many things, particularly in development. I think one of the words we need to understand, and everybody here has hit on it, is the word balance. We need to balance the community. We need to make sure that we have a balance between Drainer, Burdick, Ray, and Dunlap Road. Dunlap Road's gonna be the new, in my mind, the new cross run, such as Burdick and such as Drainer is. We have a tremendous amount of growth coming to the southern part of the township today. I mean, it's here. Their builders are asking to build and to do things in the southern part. But we have to ask ourselves, how does that balance within our community? And this balance goes all the way from the hospital that you talked about, Mr. Turner, to the bus driver that's gonna drive and pick the kids up in the subdivisions to take them to the schools. Is the schools gonna be able to handle the influx of houses and buildings and things? I sit on the water sewer committee, to the work we're doing on putting things out north, to the Stony Lake community out there, where we have issues with septic systems. So we have to be in my mind, we have to be very conscious of the balance and how we're balancing out. We can't have all 1 acre properties. We can't all have 50 acre lots. So in between that, we have to have the balance. We also have to, the short-sightedness, we have to work on our industry. We have to have grocery stores for people to shop at. We have to have barber shops for what little hair I have left to get my hair cut. So we need to remember that all those things play an important role in what we do with this master plan. Like the past master plan, it helped us to guide decisions, not only in decisions and developments, but it's helped us write our our ordinances in such a way that we can complement the master plan, and in turn the master plan complements our ordinances. So when you start tying all those together, that's what makes our community. From safety paths to sewers to water to hospitals, all those things play an important role. If we get out of balance in some of those, as we found out with one of our safety paths trying to go out to the park out here in Seymour Lake Road, there's obstacles there. We found out with the northern quadrant about putting our sewer line out north and our water lines out north. We're finding out the southern quadrant, there's a lot of interest or developments putting houses in on the southern part of Drainer Road, all the way down Drainer Road, that will impact numerous things. So the balance is very important, and that's one thing that when I read your letter through here, you're talking about safety paths, capital improvement projects. You're talking about urban boundaries, which I need a little explanation on. I'm not understanding this urban service boundaries. But all the developments, we have to have this balance. And that's what I want to make sure that we strive and have our steering committee work with.
Mr. Spiz.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move to approve the Community Engagement Steering Committee of the Planning Commission.
Thank you. Do I have support for that?
I support for discussion.
All right, we're now.
Are we a little ahead of the horse?
No.
Technically, that's another agenda item, but I understand there may be motivations in the room. I think that we've had the discussion that we need for the master plan. Just
Because we're on B right now,
Yeah,
technically.
confuse me.
Excuse me.
just to help, during the plan-to-plan meeting, we talked about community engagement, and also that it's important in community engagement that it meets people where they're at. And the best way to do that, in my experience of doing this for 20 years, is to have people who are representative of the community guide that community engagement. So it was decided at that meeting, and since implemented, to have a steering committee for the master plan that would guide community engagement. I want to stress that it's not the job of this committee to create the master plan. That's your job as the planning commissioners, and that comes directly from state law. Rather, it would be their job to help design, invite, and implement community engagement, and also to be a first look at the draft master plan. Your staff, we've met with staff and your chair and also supervisor. I think we've come up with a great list of people, and most of the people who had been invited had enthusiastically accepted. It's just that we don't have that group set for you to approve tonight. At your next meeting, we would bring that slate forward.
The next PC meeting.
The next PC meeting.
Okay.
And I suspect maybe some of those people who were invited are in the room, maybe? Yes. So,
So we're still on discussion of the master plan.
yeah. So if you have any other, I mean, again, I think Mateo and I have enough to go on, but if you wanted to take that motion, that would be helpful as well.
Mr. Spiz.
I'd like to make one more comment on the previous. I'm sorry. I was a little bit overly excited about getting to that item. I guess my point is, this Mateo brought up funding. I think that is something that we need to somehow have a discussion about, because there are many different potential funding streams out there that I don't know if everybody on this commission understands, so it'd be good to understand those. You know, maybe we get somebody in here, or maybe get some definitions out there, what the different types of funding streams could be out there. That discussion needs to happen at the township board, because I know there's a few members of the township board that are 100% against some of them. So that'll be a detriment to any future plans if there are roadblocks relative to some funding. So,
Mr. Chair, we have a motion on the table we need to
I know.
address. Suggestion.
so that was my only comment.
We have a motion on the floor and it was supported, right?
Yeah, for
Correct.
discussion.
So and it was made by who?
Me.
Myself.
Mr. Spiz? Or was it made, and
I
you supported it?
second it for discussion.
Okay, you supported it for discussion. That's the motion we
We're
have.
outside of protocol. We're
Yeah.
informal.
Do you- Okay, we're outside of protocol now?
We are a little bit, but that's okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
What was the motion again?
See, I knew Ed was, somebody was gonna ask that. You wanna
It's right
tell
in front of you.
him? Okay, do you
I
wanna,
will
would you like to
reread the
repeat it
motion.
again because we went a little
I
beyond?
move to approve the Community Engagement Steering Committee of the Planning Commission.
And it was supported by Mr. Knoll.
Yes.
Correct.
So let's go, all those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Okay, now do you wanna make another motion? Not yet.
Do we have additional discussion before I make the second motion?
Well, I don't believe we do.
Only if you need it.
Do we need it? I don't believe we
I
do.
don't
Because
think we
we're
do.
on to 11C now, right?
That you did-
Correct,
Which was the first item. on
correct. The
11C.
engagement of the steering committee of the planning commission. We're on
So we've created
11C.
the Engagement Steering Committee. So now I move to appoint Megan, I'm gonna say your last name wrong. Megan Mason Minnock from Carlisle Wortman Associates to serve as chairperson of the committee until 12/31/2024.
I'll
Second.
that.
I think I got 2 seconds going here. Did you
I think I
support?
squeaked in just faster than he did.
I think it was made by Mr. Spiz to make this appointment until 12/31 of '24, right?
Yep.
Correct.
And then I got a support from Mr. Bailey. So those all, and you know what? Let's do a roll call on that one, Susan.
Okay. Turner,
Yes.
Bailey.
Yes.
Hunwick,
Yes.
Noel,
Yes.
Spiz.
Yes.
Berger.
Yes, thank you very much for making that roll call. Okay, we're done with new business. Do we have any communications from any committee reports right now? I can tell you right now, the ordinance review committee has not met. What about economic? You haven't either.
No, sir.
Well,
So we
I think
don't,
we decided to keep that committee?
well, we did.
We did, okay.
Yeah, we did. And we have no communications at this point in time, so I don't, do you have anything you would like to say any more about? Because you're next on the list, and otherwise Mr. Sharp is not here, so
No.
So let us-
you have nothing
I
more to
have, I have,
discuss.
the master plan was the main thing
So
to report
nothing more
on.
from Carlisle Warman and nothing from the Sharp Engineering Group, so we're at point of adjournment at 8:12.
8:12.
8:02.
12.
Or no, excuse me, 8:12. Thinking all kinds of crazy stuff tonight.